I was watching those campaign ads the other day. Reminded me of something rather fascinating from the ancient Roman Empire. Oh, yes, they were quite the bunch with their bread and circuses. That's what they called it, and keep the masses fed and entertained, and they won't notice what's happening in those marble halls of power. And oh my, haven't we perfected the art? The Romans, you see, had this brilliant system. The Senate, the consuls, all supposedly working for the good of the people. But here's where it gets interesting. These powerful senators would host magnificent gladiatorial spectacles, absolutely grand affairs, while the crowds were cheering for their favorite fighters. The real games were being played in the Senate chambers. The clever bit. They time their most controversial decisions with the biggest games. Sound familiar, just like how certain bills mysteriously pass during the Super Bowl weekend or when some celebrity scandal breaks. You see, our lovely American system borrowed quite heavily from those toga-wearing philosopher. We've got our Senate, our executive branch, just like their consuls. Only difference is ours wear suits instead of togas, and they fight with words rather than swords. Well, most of the time anyway. Though I must say, at least the Romans were honest about their backstabbing. Remember that delightful little tidbit about Emperor Commodus? He'd actually fight in the arena himself. Imagine that. A leader getting his hands dirty. These days, our leaders prefer to wage their battles through Twitter feeds and press conferences. Less blood, perhaps, but the carnage is just as real. But what really makes me chuckle is how we've replaced those gladiators with our beloved athletes. Instead of the Colosseum, we've got our football stadiums, multi-million-dollar arenas where modern-day warriors battle it out while we cheer from the stands or our comfortable sofas. Just look at the Olympics, nations practically going to war over medal counts, using their athletes as proxies for political power. The ancient Greeks would be proud, or perhaps terrified. You know what's fascinating? Back in Rome, gladiators would endorse products, oil lamps, wine, even clothing. Now we've got athletes selling us everything from sneakers to insurance. The more things change, the more they stay the same, wouldn't you say? And speaking of staying the same, let's talk about propaganda. The Romans carved their version of events into stone monuments and coins. We just use digital screens now. More efficient, really. Every empire needs its storytellers after all. The Romans had their heralds' trumpets. We have our 24-hour news networks. Same tune, different instruments. Here's something that'll make your head spin. The Roman Senate had this wonderful tradition called damnatio memori, literally erasing someone from history. Nowadays we call it cancel culture. Though I must say, chiseling someone's face off a statue seems more honest than quietly editing them out of digital photos. The real kicker, though, while we're all debating last night's game or the latest celebrity scandal, bills are being passed in the dead of night. Laws that affect our very lives are slipped through like notes in a classroom. Did you know that most senators don't even read the full bills they're voting on? Some of these documents are longer than all 3 volumes of Lord of the Rings combined. At least the Romans kept their scrolls brief. And here's something that really keeps my mind turning at night. We pride ourselves on being this beacon of democracy, this shining example of freedom and justice. Yet, isn't it peculiar how many of our presidents have faced assassination attempts more than any other developed nation? Kennedy, Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley all fell to assassins' bullets. Reagan and Ford barely escaped, almost as if someone wasn't too happy with their decisions. Or perhaps they knew too much. Makes you wonder who's really pulling the strings, doesn't it? Is it the people we elect? Or those fellows in the shadows with bank accounts bigger than some countries' GDP? When a senator needs millions just to run a campaign, who do you think they're really serving? The people who can barely afford their weekly groceries, or the ones writing those 7-figure checks Did you know that in ancient Rome, it was common practice for wealthy patricians to pay off politicians' debts in exchange for favors? Today we call it lobbying and campaign contributions. They've even made it legal. Now that's what I call progress. The media's no help either. Each network spinning their own version of reality like a spider on caffeine. One channel says we're heading for doom. Another claims we're living in the greatest time ever. Same day, same events, completely different stories. The Romans at least had the decency to limit their town criers to one forum at a time. Remember how Rome used to send out bread and games to its colonies to keep them pacified? Well, just look at Hollywood's global reach. American movies, music, and entertainment spreading across the world like digital legions. Every empire needs its cultural ambassadors, after all. And let's talk about those social networks everyone's so fond of. The Romans had their forums where people gathered to gossip and debate. We just make it digital. But here's the clever part. They're collecting more information about us than any Roman censor could. Every like, every share, every angry comment. It's all being filed away somewhere. The Romans would have killed for that kind of intelligence network. But here's what really makes me lose sleep. Back then, at least people knew they were watching a show. These days, we're all part of the performance, and most don't even realize they're on stage. Every tweet, post, every shared video, we're all gladiators in the digital colosseum fighting for likes instead of our lives. The audience has become the entertainment. You know what's truly remarkable? Both empires, Roman and American, built roads to connect their territories. They used stone and concrete. We use fiber optics and satellites. Both changed the world, both spread their influence far and wide. But remember what happened to Rome when those roads started bringing back ideas they couldn't control? Sometimes I sit here and wonder, in 2,000 years, what will they say about us? Will they marvel at our digital ruins, puzzle over our social media posts like we puzzle over Roman graffiti? One thing's for certain, human nature hasn't changed a bit. We're still playing the same old games, just with fancier toys. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe there's a breaking news story about a celebrity's pet hamster that requires my immediate attention. Wouldn't want to miss today's version of Bread and Circuses, would we? I am Geoffrey Softmouth. Good day to you all.